On episode 318 of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet Carolyn Ketchum and discuss her book, Easy Keto Dinners. You can find the full show notes for this episode at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/318. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness podcast is here for you. I'm your host, Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with a specialization in corrective exercise and fitness nutrition. Let me be your coach as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. Hello, and thank you for being a part of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast. I am really, really glad you're here today. This is an awesome interview that we had with our guest today, and I know you're going to enjoy it, and I'll just leave you with one word that you can think about while I'm going through this. Cheesy biscuits. Yes, keto cheesy biscuits, and you're going to love these things. But before we get into that, I did want to talk about my online personal training. I know you might be thinking, okay, is it time? Should I do something? I want to do something. The summer's coming up pretty quick here. The weather's starting to warm up. In fact, I'm sweating in my office. I'm looking to get outside with a little bit of wind coming off the water so I can cool myself off. But it is getting warmer, and that's going to mean swimsuit season. That's going to mean getting out and wearing a little bit less and doing a little bit more. So now is a perfect time for you to start working on getting yourself into shape. And if you find that you spend some time lifting weights and you're just not quite getting the results you want, I want you to go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/gains. And I'm going to tell you a little secret about one of the things we're struggling with when we're over 40. You can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/gains. That's GAINS. And I have a little secret in there. I'm telling you why you're struggling to gain that muscle and what I can do to help you get past that roadblock. So go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/gains, GAINS. I'm looking forward to seeing you over there and checking things out. Our guest today is Carolyn Ketchum, and she's writing the book here, Easy Keto Dinners. And I have to tell you, the recipes in this cookbook are really, really easy. I'm doing the one, I did the cheesy biscuits, and it has become kind of like a staple for us to have. I basically probably used that recipe about 6 different times over the course of the last couple of weeks since I first sent me this book. And Carolyn, she also runs the very, very popular low-carb blog called All Day I Dream About Food. She's a writer, she's a photographer, and she's really, really into and understands the keto, the low-carb scene. The recipes in the book are recipes that you would cook any day. Parmesan, chicken, casserole, and like I said, the cheesy biscuits, and I can't say enough about those. So this is a really good conversation because we talk about how to make keto easier, and I know that that's a struggle a lot of us have. We want to cook healthy dinners. We want to make sure that we're eating keto when we are wanting to eat keto, and sometimes it's just very, very difficult to eat that way. The recipes sometimes you see are a little bit more complex, or you end up just eating the same bland things over and over. And Carolyn has addressed that with this book and some of the techniques and some of the things she talks about in the book that can make cooking so much easier. So with no further ado, here's Carolyn Ketchum. So Carolyn, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you, Alan. How are you?
I'm doing very, very well. Now, your book is Easy Keto Dinners, and so I think right off the bat, that's gonna jump at us to say, okay, this is gonna be really cool because sometimes it's hard to be prepared. It's hard to always be cooking, and even though we can do certain things like batch cooking or whatnot, or just keep things very simple, it's a steak and broccoli, some nights. You've put together a cookbook that allows us to take probably some of our favorite recipes and then to actually have them available to us in a fairly easy way to do. So, can you kind of explain the concept of easy for us a little bit?
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people say, oh, does this mean everything's under 30 minutes and I can make it quickly? Well, yes and no. There are plenty of easy fast recipes in the book, and then there are plenty of easy slow recipes in the book. Because sometimes if you have a 30-minute meal, it means that you're standing there chopping and cooking and sauteing and doing everything, standing there for 30 minutes actually working. And then there's recipes where it takes you 10 minutes of prep time and you throw everything in a pot or a slow cooker and you walk away and, a couple, 3 or 4 hours or up to 8 hours, and then it's done, but you're not actually cooking the whole time. So my concept of easy is just, it's really the minimal prep time and the minimal work and the minimal sort of having to create everything yourself.
Yeah. And that was what, like, as I got into it and I started looking at some of the recipes, some of them are so simple and they are very quick. I mean, some of these you'll have done in very, almost no time. Others are those kind of things where you're going to spend a little bit of time on the prep and then you're setting it free. And then you can go about your life. You're not right there. So it's a good mix of both. And so do you mind if we take a step back a little bit and kind of talk about, why you're in the market of writing keto books and keto cookbooks?
Well, yes. So I have not ever had weight to lose. Yay me. That's lucky me. I feel, that's nice. And a lot of people come to keto for weight loss. But I had gestational diabetes with my third child. And after she was born, it seemed to go away. All my blood tests seemed to be saying I was good to go. And then I kept testing every so often, and I started to see the numbers creep back up. And I got concerned, and, I went to my doctor and we agreed that I had prediabetes and needed to do something about it. I'm the one personally who did my research and came to, very few people in the medical world are actually suggesting low carb, although it's becoming more and more common, thank goodness. But I just decided after doing some research and having known when I had gestational diabetes, how much work it took to keep my blood sugar under control when I was on a standard American diet, I just knew something had to change. So I just started cooking and baking low carb.
Yeah. I even though, I practice keto most of the year, it's not something that I really try to push on anybody else because I don't want to be that guy. But it's funny, not funny, it's actually kind of sad. My sister, actually, we were having a conversation this morning about her having the same issue. She had gestational diabetes, and then after her third child, she now has to be very careful. She'll notice her blood sugar going way, way up. Mm-hmm. And, I don't think she's as diligent at checking it and managing it and doing those things, but it's kind of one of those conversation points where at least this week when I'm feeding her, she's going to be eating low carb.
Right. Good. And maybe she'll see, it's interesting. I think the thing for me and the reason I write cookbooks and write a blog is I've fallen in love with this lifestyle, but it took a while. I mean, when I decided I had to go low carb and gluten free, I basically sat on my kitchen floor and cried because I'd always been a passionate baker, and I thought that was over for me. And I've discovered it's not, which is fabulous. And I've discovered there's so many wonderful ways to cook and eat and be keto. And I think people are very much afraid of it, and I understand why, because I'm going to have to give up all my favorites, but you're not going to have to. You're just going to have to make them in a very different way. And sometimes you do have to change your taste, but it does happen. And then you start to love it and you're like, why would I ever do anything else?
Yeah. Well, my wife was going and she was doing some of the shopping on Saturday. And so I was saying, okay, took a picture of your cookbook, the ingredients list. And I said, get these things.
Oh,
and so one of the recipes in the picture that I sent to her was the cheesy biscuits that we were supposed to have for breakfast this morning. And I went up in the cabinet and pantry and started looking around. I'm like, there's no coconut flour.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, she didn't get coconut. So she wakes up and I'm like, I said, you didn't get coconut flour. And she said, I thought we had some. I'm like, no. And I said, and you don't get any cheesy biscuits.
But no cheesy biscuits for you.
No cheesy biscuits for you. But I will probably go shopping this afternoon and buy some coconut flour so she can have cheesy biscuits tomorrow. Those are very good. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. And it's like, as you kind of get into these things and you start learning more and more about the kind of recipes and stuff that's out there, you do realize there's adaptations, things you can put together. It's not as convenient as going to the grocery store and the freezer section and there being a whole keto section. Paleo kind of took off, and they advertise that they're paleo dishes and all that, and that's wonderful. But there isn't really right now kind of a push where there's low carb stuff that I can just kind of go in there and get. if it's not something that's, there are diabetic sections and stuff where they'll have candies and other stuff but when we're talking about real whole food and prepping your food and doing your things, this is really cool because you've made it really easy. Can you give us some tips? So if someone wanted to sit there and say, okay, look, what are the easy things? For me, it's always been batch cooking. That way you're getting a lot of value out of the amount of time you're investing. And I could see actually taking some of these recipes, adapting them, times 4, times 5, and putting those away. So can you kind of give us some of your tips for how do I have, and I guess the word I would actually use is an efficient and effective kitchen,
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of tips. One of the things is you say batch cooking, and I'm just not good at that. I never have been. I know it's a great way to do things. And if I'm making, something like carnitas or pulled pork or that kind of thing, it always ends up being a whole bunch. And then we put some in the freezer, and that's great. It's just never been my style. And part of the reason is that I like a lot of variety. So that's, I don't want to have to eat the same thing within 2 days of each other.
Yeah.
But the thing for me is that there are not a lot of keto convenience foods out there, but it's growing. But I would say be careful there because a lot of people are calling things keto and they have a lot of junk in them. So be careful if you are the sort of person who wants to purchase some of those things. But one of the things for me is these days grocery stores are making things really easy on us. So you don't have to make all your own bone broth. Maybe it's not quite the same. Maybe it's not quite as nutritious, but buying, say, Pacific Foods bone broth or Whole Foods brand bone broth is going to save you a lot of time and energy. Things like we were talking about cauliflower rice earlier, and cauliflower rice, all of these grocery stores are now putting out riced cauliflower, whether it's in the fresh section or the freezer section. Tomato sauce. I make a lot of my own tomato sauce, but then there are times in the, when I've blown through my stash from the summer and I just head to the store and I check the labels and I find the lowest carb one that I can. And so one of the things that I did in this book was I gave a resource guide for store-bought options because you don't have to reinvent the wheel and make everything yourself. I think that saves you a lot of time. I do think, prepping ahead sometimes, if you're going to be having a busy week, prepping things ahead, like cutting things up, or you were saying cauliflower, you do sometimes just sort of sit there in front of the TV and shred your cauliflower. Sure, why not? I mean, that's a great idea. So I think that's a fabulous one. And one of my favorite tips, though, is basically rotisserie chicken. Almost every grocery store has a rotisserie chicken section. You grab one and you can make easily 2 to 3 meals out of that. So I used a lot of rotisserie chicken in this, or you can just cook your own chicken ahead and have it, shredded and in the freezer, and then you pop it into a recipe.
Yeah. And I, when I say, batch cooking, it's not always dishes. Sometimes it's just, okay, I'm going to grill, a lot of chicken, quarters today. Because I'm out on the grill, and while I'm out on the grill, it's like I'll grill what we're going to have for dinner. Maybe we're going to have a steak, and then I'll grill a bunch of chicken while I'm out there because I know that if I do it, yeah. And so I'm doubling up on my time, and then another thing is if I know I'm going to be making a crock pot meal that day when I get back from the grocery store, so I've got or from the farmer's market, I've got all fresh vegetables and fresh meat.
Right.
And I walk in there and I just literally just sit there as I'm unpacking. I'm washing, cutting, and putting it. Rather than being bothered putting it in the refrigerator, I'm just feeding it to the crock pot and turn the crock pot on and I'm done. So almost by the time I finish unpacking my groceries, I've already got the meal started.
Yeah, I think that's fabulous. And slow cookers. And if you have an instant pot, you can do some of that stuff too. That's always fun. I'm getting used to mine and trying to do more recipes with it. And also, I think, having your, like you talk about going to the farmer's market or the grocery store, you have to have a stocked pantry. I mean, if your cupboard's bare and you come home from work and there's nothing to make, then even my recipes won't help you, so you have to pick a day of the week where you go and you have your list of what I might probably make this week. It can change a little as you go, and you have to stock things. And I'd say, keeping some proteins in your freezer, like ground beef and, chicken thighs. I'm a fan of chicken thighs over chicken breasts personally. And because I think they have more flavor, and, just having them on hand and then even if you forget to take them out of the freezer and you come home, there are ways to quick thaw, and I have a section on that in the book too, that can save you some time as well.
Yeah, and that's what it's really about having it all stocked. And now that I know, once I get through and actually make these cheesy biscuits, coconut flour will be something that I make sure is a staple that's available. So any morning I want to pick up and make it, I've got that handy. It's right there. I didn't have it there, and like you said, if you're missing that one ingredient, then you now you're looking for option number two. And going back to something else, which is probably the same thing you ate yesterday, the eggs and bacon or the eggs and sausage.
Right.
And you're like, okay, I wanted to change things up a little bit. And you said yourself, you don't like to eat the same thing, so you like to change things up. And I think that's one of the things in the Easy Keto Dinner cookbook here is that it's actually a lot of variety of flavors, and some of them are actually, very, very interesting flavors, and others I know have particular health benefits. Can you talk a little bit about what spices you're using in here and some of the reasons why you're using them, either from a pairing of flavors or health benefits?
Well, I have a lovely large spice drawer that I keep pretty much fully stocked at all times. Another question that I get from people is, do these recipes have like 5 ingredients or less? And I'm like, well, maybe if you don't count the spices, because I think, again, people confuse easy with fewer things. And if you have a spice drawer or a good spice cabinet, you've got tons of things in there to help flavor your foods. I like spicy stuff. So, but there's a lot of, one of the things that I also love, one of my favorite recipes in the book, to be honest, is, I love many of them, but the jerk chicken and rice, the one pot jerk chicken and rice, because I really love those jerk flavors. And I faked it in this one, which is really nice too. A real jerk seasoning, A, has brown sugar. We're not going to do that. And B, has Scotch bonnet peppers, which are hard to find at any time of year. So I just, made it spicy without the Scotch bonnets. And then and it's a dry rub too, whereas a real jerk seasoning mix would be sort of a wet paste. So, you can fake flavors and get really, and the other thing about flavor, there's tons of health benefits to so many spices, and I'm not sure I'm all that up on many of them. I know turmeric fights inflammation, but you have to eat a lot of it to do that. It's flavor gives us a sense of satiety. So along with the fat in the keto diet, we need flavor for us to be like, wow, now I'm full. I don't need any more. And I think knowing when we're full is one of the benefits of the keto diet, is knowing when we're full and knowing when we're satiated and stopping.
Yeah. And I think that's another thing is if you take some, I don't mean this in a bad way, but if you take some pride in the fact that you prepared a really good dish, even if it was easy, the fact that it tastes good and you really are enjoying it, you're probably going to slow down,
right,
on your eating, and you're gonna make eating a lot more mindful,
right,
which is going to make everybody's life better.
Well, I learned that early in college. I remember being in my dorm and the food was so bad that everybody they'd eat a meal, but they wouldn't feel full or they wouldn't feel satiated, and they'd head to the convenience store afterwards and get chips and chocolate bars. So, I remember doing that too and feeling like, wow, food needs to have an impact on your taste buds for you to feel satiated.
Yeah. You've got things in here like the chicken Parmesan casserole, the spicy pork and cabbage stir fry. So there's variety, and you've organized it based on the protein source throughout the book, but then you have a little guide at the back that's really cool, because if there's things you're looking to maximize, I think it was which ones are easy, which ones are slow, fast, and because you got kind of like a little guide there where you can kind of break things down in a way that what you're doing.
And allergens too. Allergens were important. I made sure that 50%, it's a little more than 50% of the book is dairy-free or can be made dairy-free. And then, there weren't actually a lot of recipes with nuts in them anyway. So if you're a nut allergy person, then you're good to go with most of these recipes. But I think that that's important too, because somebody needs to know at a glance whether something's going to have something that they're intolerant to.
And you flag those, so it's very easy for us to kind of go through and see which ones would impact us. And then the other thing is, because a lot of recipe books don't do this, is you actually have kind of the breakdown of the macros, which I think is very important for someone when they're first coming on to keto, is to understand, okay, they're trying to get their fat intake up to a certain level and keep their carb intake down to a certain level, and that kind of necessitates you kind of balancing these out. But you've put that together in a way where you can sit there and do the math real quick and say, okay, this is going to put me in the right macro profile for the day, so that I know I'm maintaining my ketosis.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody needs that. I think in this day and age, I mean, I calculate them all myself on a program that I have downloaded on my computer. So it's actually a paid program. So it's not like MyFitnessPal, which MyFitnessPal has tons of errors because it's user uploaded. But this still will have errors. And there are times, part of the problem is that it pulls from the USDA web or database. And part of the problem is sometimes there's averages, and I have to go, well, my chicken thighs weren't that big, My chicken thighs, like they pull these averages, and since I get a lot of pasture raised chicken, I'm like, my chicken thighs were not that big because they were not plumped up by all the grains so I had to sort of do some special, sometimes I was hand calculating them, which was exhausting.
It is. I used to I had a spreadsheet when I first started trying ketosis, and I'm like, okay, so I'm cooking this chili, and I'm removing the beans, and I'm using about a third, maybe a half of the tomatoes I would have used otherwise to cut back a little bit. And I got a lot more meat in there. And, when I browned it, I poured all the fat back in there, and, maybe even put some more fat in there. And so now based on everything I added, I'm like, I've got the calorie counts and I've got the macros of all of them. And then I'm adding them up, and I'm saying, okay, if I wanted to make this a serving of 500 calories, how does all this other work out? How many servings does this make? And man, that spreadsheet was like, I felt like it was the banking records for GE.
It's exhausting. It is exhausting, but I kind of find the math a little fun. And sometimes I'm sort of like, and also discovering why sometimes I would go, whoa, that's way too much protein for this recipe. And I would have to dig and do some research and figure out, because in my database, it will also have, 5 different chicken thighs in there, based on like whether the bone is in it or whether the skin is still on, or whether, it was enhanced, which I believe is the stuff where they kind of shoot them up with like, making them look plumper and juicier. And so I had to find the right one and be like, okay, let's go with this one because this is much more like my chicken breasts. And all of those are just, I feel obligated to say that all of those are, provided as a courtesy, but if somebody's very, very specific, then they should probably be doing their own calculations, because like I said, things are pulling from averages, and it's very hard to do. And if you're very specific and you weigh everything, and I know a lot of people when they first start keto, they're like weighing everything that they eat, then they should be probably trying to calculate it a little bit themselves too.
Yeah, but once you get comfortable with the way that you're preparing your dishes, and it actually gets easier and easier. And the higher the quality of the food, you kind of then are going to know where this chicken came from. So if there's egg in the recipe, you know what you're getting, the quality of the food. Then that's a whole nother reason why I'm such a big proponent of cooking for yourself, is what you're putting in your body, in your family's bodies. Yes. And when you really start talking about it, the food we eat is health. And if we're not doing that right, then we're not taking care of ourselves.
And that's why I say to a lot of people, beware the keto products, because there have been several instances recently where companies they've been attacked for erroneous nutrition labels, saying that it's only this many carbs, and they'll call themselves keto, and I'll think, yeah, I would have rather made that cookie myself than have bought your cookie and possibly put myself out of ketosis having done so, So I say beware, even when the supermarket has the keto section, which it eventually will, because it's, the tide is turning, I feel like you're going to have to still be a label reader and be smart about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is Easy Keto Dinners. If someone wanted to learn more about you, get to your blog, or learn more about this book or your other books, where would you like for me to send them?
Oh, All Day I Dream About Food is my blog because I really do dream about food all day and I enjoy doing that. I also have a second cookbook, which is, my first cookbook, The Everyday Ketogenic Kitchen, which is a more lengthy cookbook that covers everything from breakfast to dessert, and also has, sort of my story a little more, and how keto works and things like that. That's a great resource. And Easy Keto Dinners is almost like a companion guide. You're adding more dinner recipes to your repertoire.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is going to be episode 318. You could go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/318, and I'll have the links there. So Carolyn, thank you so much for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you. It was wonderful to talk to you.
If you're enjoying the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, would you please go out to iTunes and leave us a rating and review? Go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/review. That will take you to the iTunes page, and you can leave us a rating and review right there. Thank you. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet Michael Gautzer and discuss his book, Outstanding Health. Until then, have a happy and healthy day.